Welcome and thank you very much for joining. So yesterday, Joe Biden took an extra step towards expanding the power of the federal government in combating the pandemic. And it's something that comes close to mandating vaccines for a big part of the US population. Now, we will discuss with Jonathan Honig, who is today with us, three things. First, what are the facts? Second, was this big new step, as we call it, crossing the Rubicon, was it actually needed? And most importantly, what does it indicate about the role of the government and how we got here? So these are the things. So Jonathan, shall we start with the facts?
Please. Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people might not know this was a pretty dramatic announcement from President Biden. A lot of people thought this was his opportunity to try to politically get out in front of the virus and get out in front of COVID, especially, amidst 9/11 and some humiliation from the Taliban and with Afghanistan. So this was his opportunity to really try to get out in front of the virus. And what he proposed was pretty shocking, even to those of us who aren't fans of Joe Biden.
Indeed. So let's see what are the measures. So if you run a business with more than 100 employees, then every employee needs either to be vaccinated or the employee needs to bring a negative test once every week. And here's the important thing, the business is responsible for policing it, and the business is going to pay big fines if they do not comply. So something similar has happened here in Greece. And I know this because I have a friend who is, let's say, the COVID policeman in this business. So this is a person who otherwise would do productive work with whatever he was doing. And now all he has to do is make sure that people comply with COVID rules. So it brings a big onus to businesses. But that's not all. There are even tougher rules for federal workers and contractors, which means that you have to be vaccinated. And for most of them, you don't have the choice not to be vaccinated, but bring a test. And also, if you think about these categories, so businesses that employ more than 100 people and federal premises, and a lot, this has to do also with education, or with health facilities that receive Medicare or Medicaid, or people who are contractors to federal projects, we're talking about something like 100 million people. This is almost 2/3 of the workforce of the United States. So let's go with your first comment on this, and then we're gonna see if this was needed and what was in Biden's mind.
Well, it kind of goes to the point of the size of the mixed economy in general, Nikos. Rand talks about that mixture of government and private business as being the mixed economy, and the fact that, at least in the United States, the government is so big, is so far-reaching, with so much influence over people's business world, if you will, the economy. I think should be pretty sobering, no matter what the issue is, whether it's vaccines, religious doctrine, codes of conduct, or anything else. What government decides has a big influence on what every other private business in the States must do. This is the latest example.
Okay, and it's at some point, as you said, it's a momentous historical moment. At the other side, though, it's just a bit more of the same. So in a way, it's big because it tells to businesses, this is how you're gonna now. I also have a say on how you deal with your employees. But also, we've been so used to it in the last months that it's a bit like, So it's like the world goes out not with a blast, but with okay, well, I guess this would happen. So, but let's see if this is actually needed, because here's my theory, and you already touched upon this. I don't see this as an issue of necessity in terms of it's going to have a significant impact on the virus itself, and I'll explain why. It's mostly Biden wanting to play tough, and Biden got elected by saying, I'm going to put COVID under control. And the megalomania of the central planners is that they can control everything. So someone with the mindset of Biden, the mindset of the central planner, and the people who elected him, this gives them the illusion of control, the illusion that we're doing something. And why do I claim that this will not have a significant effect? So let's see the facts. So first of all, over 96%, for example, of the executive personnel who works, let's say, in the White House is already vaccinated. And yet they made a big deal that now, starting from here, starting from the White House, everyone has to be vaccinated, which is already done. Or something like 63% of the population in the United States had at least one vaccine. And if you see this, it's going up. So what usually happens is you already have a tendency, and then the government intervenes, and their narrative is, see, we fixed this. This is what Thomas Sowell says, for example, about racial equality. There was already an upward mobility of Black people. And then after the Civil Rights Act, the government said, see what happened after the Civil Rights Act, without showing us that this was already an upper trend.
And Nikos, it's the same thing with the war on poverty. I mean, poverty, at least in America, was heading down dramatically before the war on poverty actually started under Lyndon Johnson. Then it actually plateaued.
Exactly. But again, this feeds the megalomania of the central planner that it's us who did this. Or if you think about it, something like 1 in 5 employees already, they work for businesses or for employers who require for them to be vaccinated. So what we see is that there is already a push for the vaccines, and we see that more and more people are getting them. Now, me and you, we are we've been proponents for the vaccines, but this has nothing to do with what we are discussing today. So this is governing by, I think, PR and opinion polls. Because if you see most of the commentary today, they said that Biden was losing the population when it comes to how to deal with COVID. And this reminds me a lot Atlas Shrugged Part 3, because what you see there is a government that the more and more impotent they are, the more they feel that they need to do stuff. But how do they do stuff? They send people out, the morale conditioners, and they say, what is the pulse of the people? And based on the pulse of the people, we need to do something. So I see this more as a gesture of impotence and as a gesture of, I have to do something. It's like the person, I don't know if you've ever been stuck in an elevator, and particularly if you're stuck in an elevator and you're a nervous person, what you do after sometimes you start pressing every button, hoping that something will happen. And this is what I see Biden is doing. He's pressing buttons, hoping that something of all these things is going to work.
Well, Nikos, I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate, or not even devil's advocate, but an additional perspective, because, the case can be made. And first of all, I want to thank some of our before we make any case, I want to thank some of our super chatters here who participated in our supporting us. Mary Aline,
thank you.
Robert, Sammy, Mary Aline once again, all you all for supporting us, helping us keep the lights on, etc. But Rand talked about this, Nikos, when she was asked about quarantine. And, you can certainly make the case that people with COVID are transmitting a potentially dangerous disease. And, Rand was asked about this with regard to quarantine. And I'll play, with everyone's permission, if I can find it, what she said about the issue of quarantine.
The next question in regard to quarantine is somewhat different, because in the state of sense of a quarantine, if someone has a contagious disease against which there is no inoculation, then the government would have the right to require quarantine. What is the principle here? It's to protect those people who are not ill, to protect the people who, to prevent the people who are ill from passing on their illness to others. Here you are dealing with a demonstrable physical damage. Remember that in all issues protecting someone from physical damage, before a government can properly act, there has to be a scientific, objective demonstration of an actual physical danger.
All right, we'll cut it there. I mean, couldn't you make the argument, Nikos, that is a physical danger, to use Ms. Rand's words, that someone isn't. And if not by requiring those tests or the vaccinations, again, I'm playing devil's advocate, isn't government kind of giving up its responsibility?
So here's the thing. First of all, Rand is talking about quarantining people who are demonstrably sick. Now, it's a big question. How can you find who is sick, particularly in a disease that can start or can be spread by asymptomatic? But notice that she said, so even if we give all benefit of the doubt, notice that Rouhani says for a disease that you cannot be inoculated. And this is one of my biggest problems with Biden's message yesterday. He actually undermines the vaccines. So he says at some point, where is it? He says, we will protect you from your unvaxxed co-workers. So in the same speech where he wants to say, look, you need to get vaccinated, in the same speech he says, I need to protect you from those who are not vaccinated. What does this tell you about the message of the vaccines? This is music to the ears to people who want to undermine the vaccines, because they say, look, actually, you are not protected by the vaccine, which is not true. Of course, we know we have now an ocean of data that says that the vaccines are good in protecting you, definitely from heavy disease, definitely from hospitalization and death. I was looking today the data about my age group in the UK. There has been no deaths to the vaccinated for a significant amount of time. So we have a lot of data. And yet, you have this message that says that those who are unvaxxed are the danger. Now, is this factually true? Like, yes, if everyone was vaxxed, then we would have a slower spread. However, what we were saying at the beginning of the lockdown, if you feel that you're threatened from this virus, you have the right to stay at home. What you don't have a right to do is to tell everyone else what they're going to do. This happens, the same thing happens now. We have the vaccine, but if you are still worried, you have the right to wear your mask, wear 2 masks, be careful what you do, socially isolate. You can take the responsibility for that. But we've forgotten completely of this. The idea is that it has to be, because this is the essence of altruism and of self-sacrifice. If I have to do it, then you have to do it, and everyone has to do it. If I want to put my values on put, you have to put your values on put. If I cannot travel, you cannot travel. And this is like a ripe fruit that falls. This is the ideology that has been prevalent all this time. We're all in this together, which in me is the creepiest slogan that I don't ever want to hear again. Because we're all in this together means, oh, you're vaccinated. Oh, you're confident in your immune system or whatever, and you're vaccinated. Tough luck. You have to do the same thing as everyone else does. So that's why I'm a bit skeptical to the devil's advocate, and I would say the devil's advocate, sir, you're wrong.
Well, there's a question here for you, Nikos, from a super chatter, and thank you to all of our super chatters. I'll throw this out there as just my own kind of devil's advocate once again. I mean, as objectivists, we're pro-science, we're pro-technology, we're pro-innovation. So my curiosity is, are people opposed to the vaccine because the mandate is coming from governments? I mean, if this was Apple that came out with a vaccine, or Microsoft, would people say, oh yeah, I want to line up to get that? Is the fact that these mandates are coming from government are what people kind of naturally then necessarily rebel against. Let me ask that to maybe some of our super chatters, but Nikos, let me ask you LMF's question, if I could. A question for Nikos: is there a way in which we can interpret Biden's executive order as being motivated by a desire to impose force against the enemy tribe? What say you?
Oh, of course, no question about that. So I don't want to. We had the discussion 3 days ago on vaccines being part of the culture war. I don't want to repeat myself, but what I said there was, do the thought experiment. What would have happened if Trump, in the beginning, very early, was pro-lockdown, pro-vaccine mandates? I wouldn't be surprised if the other side would be completely against them. So the vaccines have become now this culture war thing, which is very, very exhausting intellectually and stupid. Because what we should say is, look, if you're still hesitant about the vaccines, we respect it as your right, but you're probably wrong. But when the government says, I have to vaccinate you, then the person who would otherwise be rational now poses as the defender of freedom. So the Candace Owens of this world that talk about, quote, experimental vaccines and about don't put poison or whatever. So now they have now the moral high ground that we resist tyranny. And I think it's important that people are making a stance, and they're saying, for example, there's going to be civil disobedience. Already I've seen Grant Cardone, National Review. I've seen big institutions saying, we're not going to enforce this. By the way, how nice that we saw the same with Texas, with the abortion law. We saw, for example, Lyft saying that, no, we're not going to punish you if you go for an abortion. So I like this civil disobedience. This doesn't mean, though, that the reason that everyone is doing it is equally to be respectable. Yet, the fact that some anti-vaxxers are against this doesn't mean that I will not be against this. And yes, of course, Biden is doing this also for, quote, partisan reasons, because it's what his tribe expects for him, and it's what his tribe expects against, quote, COVIDiots or the other side. So that's what happens when everything, even the vaccines, is politicized, and when everything is political.
Let me ask you a question, Nikos. If you had a business, let's say, with 20 employees, would you require that they be vaccinated?
I haven't thought of it, to be honest, but I wouldn't decline it. First of all, I'd want to know each one how they think on the topic, because how you think on this topic says a lot about who you are. Someone who says, look, I've had allergies, I've had things. Someone who has some healthy skepticism, I would say, okay, maybe we'll discuss this. If someone would say no, because it's Bill Gates, whatever, then it depends. Again, what type of business you have, what is.
That's a good lot of hedges there. That's all right. Let me ask you this: if you were having a dinner party right now with 5 people coming over to your house, would you require that they be vaccinated?
I haven't thought about it, to be honest. But again, it depends. How much of value is that person to me? So if this is my best worker, but on that particular topic, so they think rationally in everything, but in that topic, they don't think rationally, maybe I would say, yes, you know what, it's okay. But that's not the point. I can be rational in the way I run my business or I run my life. I don't affect anyone except the people who choose to deal with me. What the government
and you're
does,
not using force.
Exactly. The government is saying.
Corey has made that generous contribution. Thank you, Corey. And he's echoing your point. He says that was an excellent point, Nikos. Government undermining science in the quest for more control. Very well said.
Yeah, and again, this is not going to do much for people understanding why the vaccines are good. It's going to be like, oh, it's Fauci and the globalists and all that stuff. So again, I think no one has done more harm to the vaccine narrative than the people who supposedly like and promote the vaccines. But here's also another thing that I really found creepy yesterday. Notice this line from Biden. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. You're not patient with people's rights. You're not this father who gets angry and you're going to send the kid in the room. This is not how rights work. But let's see how Biden sees rights. Quote, this is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you. But it's exactly about freedom, I would say. So notice once more here, for Biden and for people who think like Biden, and unfortunately for people also on the right, rights are a luxury. Rights are this thing that we wear in parties and then we put back in the closet. Rights are not an existential need as we understand them. Right is this thing that, well, sometimes we let you believe that, like a father who is going to let the kid believe that they have a say on something, but when things get serious, it's okay, now your rights are revoked. I think this is the biggest problem of all this, the complete dismantling of the idea that rights is something that we have. What we see is that
is there a convolution here of right to not be vaccinated, and what I imagine, again, devil's advocate here, people like Biden would be saying, well, you think you have the right to infect. They interpret you not getting vaccinated as you believing, well, you probably, Nikos, wouldn't say that. You don't believe that someone who is not only has COVID has the right to go around and cough on everyone or even go around and be with everyone.
We're talking here about every single person in the United States. We're not talking about someone who they have the disease. Now, this is very difficult because with COVID, you don't know if you have it. But the thing is, if you open this floodgate, then anything goes. Then you can say the same thing about flu. You could say, look, if you have the flu, fatality rate is lower, but still you might kill someone. or still you might inflict damage to someone, even if it is they lose 2 days of job. So then then objectivity goes out of the window, because you could use the same principle for many things. So it's one thing to say, Greg Salmieri gave a good example once, says, imagine someone who is like radioactive and comes close to you. Then objectively you can say, you are now hurting my rights. But here is way more nuanced. Not so much on how serious the disease is, but also on at what point do you understand that you have it? How can you say that you go? And so if you would do this intentionally, so if someone knew that they have it and then you go and cough, you have the legal tools to say that here you're doing intentional damage. Otherwise, you give up the idea that you quarantine the sick and not the healthy. And now forever, the government literally forever has the right to impose lockdowns and quarantines for whatever reasons. And that's why I said the biggest victim here is the idea of rights. Rights are now a luxury to be given to you so that you are allowed to them when it's convenient and when it's easy.
I'll say this. I mean, I was trying to get my, I won't shock everyone by taking my shirt off, but I actually got my third shot, my booster yesterday, Nikos. So I have the extra thing, and I had to do a little sweet talking to get it, because I want the most vaccine I can get. And I resented the fact that
you're the first person I know who gets the booster. Is it even available?
Yeah, Nikos, I'm going to talk my way into getting it. And I resent the fact that government restricts it, that the government said, oh, well, it's only going to be for this group or that group. I mean, my thought is, let's give it to the highest bidder. Let's get the capitalist system working. Let's get the market system working. And, my thought would be, don't people want to, and Marilyn says, I'm vaccinated. People can hang out with me or not if they choose. I don't tell others what their risk tolerance should be. I'm glad I'm retired. Well, I'm glad I'm vaccinated, Nikos, and I'm a little bewildered by people who are not interested in getting vaccinated and getting the most vaccinated they can. I mean, look, I have the biggest iPhone I can get. I have the biggest computer monitor I can get. Why wouldn't I want the biggest vaccine? Of course, I want the top vaccine I can get. Thank you, Sammy is bored again, for your pound as well. So it's interesting, Nikos, but please.
Can I say something about what Marilyn said? It gave me an extra understanding to the question you asked. Would you hang out with 5 people? See how context matters here. So when I'm in Greece and I'm around, for example, my parents or my very young niece or whatever, I probably wouldn't do this, particularly before my parents got vaccinated. Now I would probably do it. So, but only every single person can take these decisions. No one can take these decisions for you. And that's the importance of having responsibility. And having responsibility is not a luxury. It's the way that you deal with your life. It's the only way you can deal with your life. Remember what Ron says. People cannot think for you in the same way people cannot digest for you. So only you can decide what you're going to do to protect those around you. Now, what I wouldn't do is lie to people. I wouldn't go, for example, on a date. Let's say a girl, for some reason, says, I only date vaccinated. If I lie to her, then we have issues here. But I'm not talking about that. When you're open to people, let people decide. It's their life, and they have to make the responsible choice. It's what makes them human beings, the ability to think and to judge for themselves.
I agree with that. I mean, and kind of we go back to this idea, Nikos, that, government, I think we believe, should really have no role in medicine, in people's choices about their health and their lives and that protection. When they start to get to the business of actively infecting others and putting their life at risk, we know that that's a place for government really to get involved. But when it comes to people's health and their own individual choices, they should make that rationally on their own with the consultation of their family and doctors. Thanks, Marilyn. She says you can get a booster based on core mobilities. Lie. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't say. If you can say, yeah, I got the clap or something. I don't know. Tell them you got something and you want to get the booster. Bonnie says it's time to expose the concrete base of the concept of individual rights. It's real. It's the one thing that the founders didn't have. Bonnie, that's what we're trying to do. We've got all of Rand's books here. Rand's sayings and slogans. We're trying to popularize Miss Rand's ideas in the US, in the UK, and all around the world. I mean, this is the only thing that can save humanity. I mean, it's kind of why I wrote Textbook of Americanism. I think those ideas are really the only thing that can save mankind, save the United States, save the UK, and the human race. So thanks for being part of it. Thanks for supporting us here. And
let's finish with this, Jonathan. So someone might say, oh, you did an episode 3 days ago about vaccines, and you were complaining that vaccines are part of the culture war, and now you're making an episode about Biden and the vaccines. It's super, super important that we clarify the principles here. And today what we have is something that goes against individual rights on a scale which is massive. So I think this is completely different from criticizing conservatives that epistemologically they're so screwed up they cannot even think straight on why they're against the vaccine. So these two issues are completely different, and I'm proud that objectivists are among the very few people that can recognize the difference between the one and the other, that you can be passionately pro-vaccine, even quote cheating your way to getting your dose earlier, not being to the detriment of anyone else because you didn't steal it from anyone, but at the same time being able to say I'm against mandates. I'm against mandates that are not the result of a voluntary transaction. You can tell to your employees you need 18 doses, or I don't want any vaccinated in my premises. When the government is doing it, is the threat of force, which is not okay.
Will you only, quickly, Nikos, parting shot, will you only date vaccinated women for now?
Well, people will have to join us in Clubhouse to find out.
All right. How about that for a tease? Thank you, Corey. Corey says he hears sirens in the background. You've said too much, indeed. So we'll adjourn to Clubhouse. Thank you all for your participation, for the super chats, for being with us every day on the Daily Objective, and most of all, for telling a friend, sharing the episode, sharing what we do here, and joining our community. So we'll see you in the Clubhouse.
One last comment, please. One last comment. Yesterday was the premiere of the Lisa Van Damme series. And it's one of the, I feel so proud for the work of ARC UK when we bring such quality content. And Jonathan also sent a super chat, so thank you. So I encourage people to go and watch it. This show, if it was on Prime TV, it would have millions of views. It's of the quality to have hundreds of thousands of views. So check out the Lisa show and consider supporting our work. If you can't afford becoming a member, share it, put it on your Facebook, tell to your friends about it. Tell to your friends you want to hear more about parenting, here are some reasonable people. Or you are a bit, you don't like the Democrats or the conservatives with the vaccine, here is a voice that gives you a third option. Actually, I would say a second option, because the two options are on the same epistemological mindset, and we are the only different. In Greece, the Communist Party had a slogan back in the day: 5 parties, 2 policies. They meant the Communist Party policy and everyone else. I would say the same. 100 ideologies, actually 2 ideologies. Us and those who think based on tribalism or whatever works, or how I can force my take on other people. And with that, let's say thank you to our viewers, and let's join to Clubhouse, where I want to learn more about your third shot. And
the book. We'll talk about that then.
We'll talk about that then, yeah. Bye, everyone.